for today, or this particular session, is the key to living a good life. I think you pretty much probably already know that most people on the planet, all 7+ billion or 8 billion or whatever number we've arrived to now, seek to understand or know the answer to this question. What is the key to living a good life? And for those that adhere to Scripture or believe that God speaks to us through Scripture and gives us instructions, we believe that the key is there. The key to living a good life is there. As a matter of fact, the word for the Bible that we call the Bible is actually the Torah, is what God calls it, which does not mean law, but more accurately, the word Torah literally means teachings and instructions from God. So with that being said, let us go ahead and get into the topic for today. First, I'd like you to think about what do you think is the key to living a good life? We should have all probably thought about it at some point. Money, is that what you would say would be the answer to all things? I mean, there is a scripture that actually says that money answers all things. It doesn't say that it is the answer to all things, and there's a bit of a difference there. Is it faith in God? If you are a very religious person, do you believe that as long as you believe in God or believe in the Son of God, is that enough to grant you or guarantee you a good life? Or is being a good person what you believe is necessary for living a good life? And I think all those things actually have a little bit of validity in it, and you probably would argue either way, or there are people who would argue for each of these things, I'm sure. But what does the Scripture have to say about it? Okay, and so to start our search and understanding there, I want us to first look at Psalms chapter 34 and verses 12 through 14, and listen to what it says. I want to read it here. Now, this is from the New King James translation, but listen to what it says. Who is the man who desires life and loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Now, I won't read it again. Again, this is Psalms 34, verse 12 through 14, but I want to encourage you and strongly encourage you to read and reread and meditate on this particular scriptures, because I believe that it holds the key. And this is the simple teaching and instruction from God that we want to or should follow if we want to live a good life. If you desire, the scripture says, to live a good life, essentially, to see many days of good, then number one, you should keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. You should depart from evil and do good, and you should seek peace and pursue it. And so obviously we want to take a little bit of a more in-depth look, as we said, from a Hebraic perspective, as to what do these things mean? What does each word that is significant and stands out here means? And so let's start with the word for desire. The Hebrew word that is translated here as desire is the word shofetz. How we would say it in English, or chofetz, and it means a desire that is pleasing or attracting to you. And I threw this picture here up of Hawaii because, in my mind, this is an area that is pretty much desirable for me to visit at least at certain times of the year. Just very, very beautiful and picturesque there. And so this is a desirable place. It's an attractive place to me. And so the word here for desire, there are several different words that we could use for desire. There's a word that is retzon, which is a desire or the will. But the desire that is used here, the chofetz, is a desire that is relating to a life that is pleasing or attracting to you. Now that's important because if you look at the scripture and read what it says, this also means, in other words, if it's true that if you guard your tongue from speaking evil and your lips from speaking deceit, and that is a part of the key for a good life, then it also means that the opposite is true. That if we don't guard your tongue from speaking evil and your lips from speaking deceit, that you will not live a desirable or a good life. In other words, there's a direct correlation to our experience in life and the words we release. Now, we've heard that said before in other ways. Death and life in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. That's the book of Proverbs. It that scripture comes from. The Hebrew word here, now, I think it's important that we understand what God means by good and evil, and that it may be a little bit different from what we think. The word Hebrew, or the Hebrew word here for good, I'm sorry, let's start with evil. The Hebrew word here that we translate as evil into English is the word ra, which means, it actually means evil, but it means in the sense of something that is dysfunctional or obviously does not function as it was purposed or intended to. In other words, the idea of evil in God's mind has to do with something not functioning properly. If you go back and you study the account of Genesis, this becomes clear, especially when you understand the idea of what the word good means. The word good in Hebrew is the word tov, and it refers to something that functions properly or correctly or as it was purposed to or created to. And so this creates, probably for most people, outside of understanding the scripture from the Hebraic context, this creates at least a new concept or understanding of good and evil, that in God's eyes, that good has to do with something that functions as it was purposed to or created to. And evil has to do with something that is dysfunctional or something that is not functioning or working properly. So in the beginning, in Genesis 1, as we read the account of the creation of the heavens and the earth, and we see that God said, and that it was good on this day, or this particular thing that he created was good. The idea there was not that it was good because it was not evil. The idea there was that it was good and that what he had created was functioning just as he had created it to. That, and when he, in scripture, then again, the obvious is also true of something that is evil. Now, I think that's very important because now we have to read or reread that scripture in Psalms 34 and probably many other scriptures where the concept of good or the word of good or evil are used. We have to go back and visit Psalms 34 when it says, "Who is the man that desires a good life?" Now watch this. The word good life then refers to not just a life that is absent of evil as we've traditionally or even as we've traditionally defined it. I can't think of another way to really say that there. But the idea of a good life is a life in which everything is functioning as it was supposed to. That's the idea. A life where things in your life function as they're supposed to, where you function in your purpose and as you were created to, and as God breathed life into you and created you and then to live in this generation and time frame for. And so that's very important foundation that we must have as we go on to understanding what is the key to having a good life. First of all, we need to understand what is good in the mind of God. Good doesn't mean, it doesn't mean a certain quality or quantity as it does have to do with a specific purpose or functioning of a thing. Now, so when we speak about dysfunctional or evil things, okay, it attracts more dysfunction or evil into our lives. When we speak about things that are good or function properly, then we attract more things that are functional as they're supposed to be into our lives. In Philippians 4, verse 8 through 9, this is the reason why the Apostle Paul says that we should focus and meditate on things that are good, that are lovely and worthy of praise. He goes on and says a couple of other things there that we should focus on because it's what we want to see. We really don't want to see things that are evil. We really don't want to see a lot of dysfunction in our life there. And so a big part of the key is not to speak about it. It's not that we ignore the fact that things are dysfunctional. It's that we are to speak about the things that we want and desire. A prime example is if you go back to Genesis and read in the beginning where it says that there was darkness, and darkness covered the face of the deep, where everything was without form and void, and the original Hebrew context there, the language there is everything was chaotic and dysfunctional. But God didn't speak about that. He didn't focus on that. Rather, he identified it so that we understood what was there before he spoke. But God didn't talk about how dark it was because God wanted light. He spoke light. God didn't talk about things that were dysfunctional, but he spoke things that he wanted to be functional and good. And after that, he identified those things as good. This is important that we understand, again, that the key to life, or a key to life, has to do with the words of our mouth. So the Hebraic concept of meditating means, again, he says to meditate. Paul says we're to meditate on things that are good and things that are lovely and of a good report and things that are worthy of praise. Well, what does it mean in the biblical concept of meditation? It's a word that means that essentially, and I'm paraphrasing here, that we are to literally keep things in our mouth, or words in our mouth, that are functional and worthy of praise. In other words, if someone were to bump into us and we were to accidentally open our mouths and say something, we would say something that is worthy of praise. We would say something that is good. We would say something that is lovely and of a good report. We wouldn't have negative conversation to spew out all over our community and all over our neighbors. And when you go to work and meet someone in the bathroom, that you're speaking negatively regarding the weather and regarding the job and regarding the boss. That is not attracting the life that you want. And so the key to understanding how to attract a good life, or how to live a good life, has to do with, first, refraining from speaking about dysfunction and focusing on speaking about things that are good.